My friend brought her boyfriend to my bachelorette party. I said girls only. She called me homophobic, and what happened next cost me everything I built for 10 years. She called me a prejudiced person in front of 31 people, and by the end of that night I had lost my business, my wedding, and the only version of myself I had spent a decade constructing from nothing. I want to say that plainly before anything else because the plain version is the only honest version I have left, and I am done softening things for the comfort of people who were not in that room. I said girls only. I said it clearly, 6 weeks before the party, in a message to every single person on the guest list. No exceptions, no asterisks, no room for interpretation. It was my bachelorette party. I was getting married in 3 weeks. I had one request. One. And when Dominique walked through the door with her boyfriend on her arm and I asked to speak with her privately and told her he could not stay, she turned to the room of 31 women who had come to celebrate me and announced that my girls only rule was a cover for my prejudice against her relationship. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when they are not neutral. When they are deciding. And I stood in the middle of my own celebration and felt the floor disappear beneath me before I had said another word. Dominique and I had been friends for 11 years. Not surface friends. The deep kind, built from shared history and genuine knowledge, from the years before either of us had become the person we eventually became. I had shown up for her through things that had cost me socially and professionally. I had defended her name in rooms she was not present in. When she started dating her boyfriend Marcus 8 months before the party, I had welcomed him fully, had him over for dinner, made real conversation with him, treated him like someone who mattered because he mattered to her and she mattered to me. I did not have a problem with Marcus as a person. I had a single, clear, advanced policy about a single evening that I had communicated to 31 people with full transparency. That was the entirety of what I had done. And she took that moment and she turned it into something else entirely, in front of an audience she had already assessed, with a word she had clearly prepared. Here is what you need to understand about my business before I tell you what happened to it. I had spent 10 years building a wellness brand from a single account posted from my bedroom into a company with a physical studio, a team of 6 people, and a client community I had assembled one person at a time through consistency and the specific credibility that comes from being genuinely who you say you are. My brand was not a performance of values. I held those values. I had built the entire enterprise on a foundation of authenticity and community and the trust that accumulates when people see you behave the same way in public and in private over many years. 10 years of that trust. And a 47-second recording undid it faster than I could track. Someone recorded the moment Dominique made her announcement. I did not know this was happening. I was managing the situation in front of me, trying to move the conversation somewhere private, trying to contain something that was already beyond containing. The clip was posted before I got home that night. It contained the word prejudice 3 times, my face receiving it, and 31 women standing in a room where a celebration had just become something else. It did not contain the advance message. It did not contain the girls only notice sent 6 weeks prior. It did not contain 11 years of friendship or the dinner with Marcus or any of the actual context. It contained 47 seconds, and the 47 seconds told a story that was not the full story and spread to 4,000 people before I was asleep. My studio manager called at 7 in the morning. 3 clients had canceled overnight. She did not know what to tell the team. I said I would be there in an hour. I drove to the studio and I stood in front of my 6 employees and I told them everything. The advance notice. The girls-only policy. The private conversation that became public. Every detail, laid out as clearly as I could lay it. I watched their faces while I talked and I understood what I was seeing, which was people hearing new information through the filter of something they had already decided, and what they had already decided was the version that had been in their phones since the previous evening. 3 of them did not return the next day. I want to stay with that for a moment. These were not strangers. One of them had been with me for 6 years, from the earliest days when the studio was barely covering its own costs, and I had made personal sacrifices to keep the team intact through a difficult quarter. She sent me a message that evening saying she could not continue working for someone whose values were not aligned with inclusion. 6 years. 47 seconds? The weight of those 2 things sitting next to each other is something I have not been able to balance no matter how many times I have tried. The client cancellations came in steadily through the following week. Not all at once but consistently, a daily erosion that had no floor I could locate. By the end of week 1 I had lost 22% of my client base. By week 2 the number was 31%. Every cancellation message said essentially the same thing. They had seen the recording. They had concerns. They needed to make choices about where they placed their trust. Not one of them asked for my version of events. Not a single person who had been in my community, some of them for years, sent a message asking me to explain what had happened before they made their decision. The 47 seconds were sufficient. The 47 seconds were all they needed. Daniel stayed constant through all of it, and I want to say that clearly because this story needed one thing that did not go wrong, and he was it. He sat with me through the nights I could not settle and the mornings I could not eat, in the specific particular misery of watching something you built dismantle itself in a way you cannot stop no matter what you do. He never said "I told you so," though he had every right to. 6 weeks before the party, he had gently suggested I might want to reconsider the girls-only policy given how Dominique had been speaking about her relationship recently. I had said I did not think it was necessary. I had been wrong. He never said it. He said, "I believe you and I love you and we will work through this," and he meant every word, and on the nights when nothing else was solid, he was solid. We postponed the wedding. Not cancelled. Postponed. But postponed 3 weeks before a wedding you have planned and paid for and told everyone about has a quality that is its own category of loss, separate from and simultaneous with the other losses, and I will not diminish it by moving past it quickly except to say that calling the venue and the caterer and the guests was one of the harder sequences of conversations I have had, and I did all of it in the same 2 weeks that the studio was falling apart, which meant I was having those conversations without the capacity to absorb them properly, and some of that absorption is still happening now. By the end of week 2, I sat in the studio after everyone had left and I looked at what I had built. The specific quality of the light in a room you have arranged deliberately. I had painted those walls myself the first month. I had chosen the plants and the equipment and the shade of the walls and the angle of the lighting and every piece of programming on the schedule. I had made it every hire and celebrated every milestone and carried every setback and built something that was entirely mine in the way that only things you make from nothing ever fully belong to you. I called my accountant. I said the numbers out loud. She was quiet. She said she would confirm in the morning. The morning confirmed what I already knew. The studio closed 4 weeks after the Bachelorette party. Now let me tell you about Dominique. I have been building the external story, but the external story is a surface over something deeper, which is the story of what I came to understand about the friendship once everything built on top of it had been stripped away. I reached out on day 3. Not confrontational. A message saying I needed to talk and that I was devastated and that she deserved to hear the full picture directly from me. She read it. She said nothing. I sent another on day 5. She read it. She said nothing. On day 8 she posted something carefully worded on her own platform about accountability and how people reveal themselves under pressure. 8,000 people engaged with it. Several of them identified me by name in the comments. I did not respond publicly. My lawyer advised against it. Daniel said it was my decision. Layla, who is direct in the way that 12-year friendships allow, said the truth was on my side and silence was not protecting me. All 3 of them were right about different things. But in the silence of those weeks, going back through 11 years of friendship with what I now knew, I found something I had not let myself look at directly before. The specific way Dominique handled disagreement. Not privately, not directly, but with an audience. The time she had done to other people some version of what she had done to me, and I had told myself those situations were different because I was the one who understood her, the one who had the full picture, the one she would not do it to because we were genuine. The pattern had been there for 11 years. I had simply been standing in the part of the room where it was not pointed at me. Until the night it was pointed at me. And then I understood what everyone else had understood before I did. That understanding, sitting with it in the quiet of a business I could no longer open, was its own specific kind of loss. Not for who she had revealed herself to be. For who I had believed she was for 11 years. For every time I had defended her version of events against the people she had aimed the pattern at. For every room I had been in where I had chosen her characterization over the person she was characterizing, without asking, without pausing, because I had been certain I knew the real version. I had known a version. I had not known the real one. And the real one had been there the whole time, pointed at other people, waiting for the moment it would turn toward me. The studio closed on a Thursday. I went alone to hand over the keys because I needed to close what was mine with my own hands rather than have it handled by someone acting on my behalf. I stood outside for a moment before going in. The sign still had my name on it. I had put it there 6 years ago on a morning when attaching my name to something felt like proof of arrival rather than what it felt like now, which was the last visible evidence of something that was ending. I went inside. I moved through the space one final time. I placed the key on the counter and I walked out, and I did not look back because looking back required an emotional capacity I needed for what came next. Daniel was outside. He had driven separately and had not come in with me because he had understood without being told that this was something I needed to do alone. He looked at my face when I emerged and opened his arms, and I stood on the pavement outside my closed studio, and I let myself be held without managing anything, without preparing for the next thing, without any of the forward-facing composure I had been performing for 4 weeks. We stayed there until I was ready to move. Then we got in the car and went home. My mother arrived that Saturday. I had been managing the information I gave her, Protecting her from the full financial weight of what had happened in the way you protect people who love you from the specific details of the worst things because their pain about your situation is its own weight to carry alongside your own. I told her the studio had closed. She was quiet for one moment. Then she said, "Okay. Now we figure out what comes next. Not I am so sorry. Not this is devastating. The practical version, the one that was actually useful, the one that treated me like someone capable of moving forward rather than someone requiring consolation." She was right. I said okay. She sat at my kitchen table and we made the practical accounting of what was next, and having the accounting on paper, however stark, was better than carrying it only in my head where it could not be organized. In week 3 I hired a consultant to help me understand the state of my public presence and what, if anything, could be rebuilt from it. She was direct in the way professionals are direct when honesty is what they are being paid for. She said the recording had moved through its peak engagement cycle but was now permanently indexed, which meant it would appear in searches indefinitely unless something new and substantial enough displaced it over time. She said the options were rebranding, complete withdrawal, or sustained rebuilding. She said rebuilding required eventually addressing what had happened publicly, not in a way that reopened the argument, but in a way that added context clearly enough to give people who had only seen 47 seconds the information they needed to form a more complete view. I thought about that for 2 weeks. My lawyer said wait. Daniel said my decision. Layla said the truth was on my side and silence was not serving me. I had been silent for 6 weeks. The silence had not been generating reconsideration. The 47 seconds had not been reconsidered in the absence of anything to reconsider them against. I posted a statement in week 7. A precise one. I said my bachelorette party had a girls-only designation communicated clearly to every guest 6 weeks in advance. I said I had applied that standard equally to every person present. I said I did not consider that standard to be what it had been characterized as and that I had not responded publicly sooner because I had been attempting to address the matter privately and that avenue had not been made available to me. I said I was not interested in a continued public exchange. I said I was genuinely saddened by the loss of a long friendship and by the consequences that had followed from one evening, and that I trusted the people who had known me over the years to hold a full version of who I was alongside the clip they had seen. I did not name Dominique. I characterized nothing she had done. I stated my own actions and stopped there. The response was divided in the way public responses always are, which is to say some people took it as confirmation of what they had already decided and some people took it as information they had not had. Enough of the second group reached out privately to tell me that the statement had done something the silence had not been able to do. 3 former clients asked if they could return. They said they wished they had asked before they left. I said I understood why they had not. I did understand. The 47 seconds had been in their phones and the shorter version of a story, when it arrives first and with enough certainty, is difficult to hold open for a longer version that has not yet arrived. Dominique did not respond to the statement. She had not responded to anything I had sent privately. By that point I had understood that her silence was not uncertainty or processing. It was the same silence I had watched her use throughout our friendship when she had done something she could not defend directly and had chosen not to engage rather than account for it. I had seen it aimed at other people and had not named it for what it was. I named it now. The naming did not resolve anything but it completed something, closed a loop that had been open since the night she turned to a room of 31 people and chose the word that would land the hardest. I began rebuilding in month 3. Not the studio. The studio was permanent in its closing and I had made peace with the permanent by accepting it rather than holding energy in reserve for the hope of its reversal. I rebuilt something smaller and more deliberate, on the foundation of what was actually true rather than the foundation I had believed I was building on before. I went back to the work itself, the content and the practice and the actual substance underneath the brand, the thing that had been real before the brand was built around it and that remained real now the brand had been removed. I wrote. I shared. I built slowly and without infrastructure, from a single account again, from the beginning again, and the beginning again was humbling and clarifying in equal measure. The community that returned was smaller and arrived more slowly and was more intentional than what I had lost. The people who came were people who had sought context rather than accepted the clip. They were not the audience I would have chosen for the speed of rebuilding, but they were the right foundation for the kind of rebuilding that would hold. And I understood the value of foundations now in a way I had not understood before. The bachelorette party had shown me what happens when a foundation has a weakness you did not know existed. Daniel and I married 4 months after the original date. 47 guests instead of 112. The reduction had been practical and also clarifying, in the way that the process of deciding who to include in a celebration after a period of loss has a clarifying effect on the list. The 47 people present were people whose presence felt genuinely earned. The ceremony was warm in a way the larger planned version might not have been, might have been too large for, might have diluted. My mother cried. Daniel cried. I arrived at the ceremony in a state I can only describe as clarity, the specific clarity of someone who has lost enough to know exactly what she is holding and why it matters. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I knew it more certainly than I could have known it before, because before I had not yet understood what it cost to be here. I think about the evening sometimes. Not with the acute sensation of the early weeks. With something more considered, something that contains the grief of 11 years of genuine friendship alongside the clear understanding of who that friendship actually was at its core. The grief is real because the years were real to me, even though the version of Dominique I had constructed from them was not entirely accurate. The absence of her from my current life is not something I experience as loss. The presence I have been spared from is, I now understand, not the presence I believed it was. I learned things from this that I am continuing to learn. I learned that a public presence built on authentic values is not automatically protected by those values when it can be reduced to a clip short enough to send without context. I learned that people who leave without asking do not necessarily leave because they have judged you. They leave because the shorter version of the story arrived first and required less effort than waiting for the longer one. I learned that silence, chosen out of dignity, reads in a public landscape as an absence of counternarrative. An absence of counternarrative is filled by whatever is already in circulation. I learned these things at the cost of 10 years of work, and I would have chosen a different tuition if the choice had been available. I also learned, with a precision I did not have before, who showed up. Layla, who arrived the night of the party and stayed through the worst weeks without requiring me to perform gratitude for her presence. Daniel, who never once made me feel like the cancelled wedding or the closed studio were things I had done to him. My mother, who came on Saturday and said, "Okay, now we figure out what comes next." A handful of clients who reached out after the statement. These were not large numbers. They were the right ones. Here is what I want to say to anyone who has a person like Dominique in their life. Not someone obviously harmful. Someone genuine in many ways, with real history, with warmth, with shared experience substantial enough to make questioning them feel disloyal. Someone you have defended and shown up for and given the specific trust that long friendships earn. Someone who, when it has come down to it, has repeatedly handled disagreement with an audience rather than directly, who has consistently chosen the version of events that cast them in the best possible light regardless of its accuracy, who has never once in the years you have known them been willing to be wrong in front of other people. Watch that pattern. Not the individual moments. The accumulated pattern across the years. Watch what they do when there is a genuine disagreement and an audience available simultaneously. Watch whether the resolution happens privately or publicly. Watch whether they have ever, in all the time you have known them, chosen private accountability over public performance when both options were available. I watched Dominique do to other people exactly what she eventually did to me. I told myself each time that those situations were different. That she had been genuinely wronged in those cases. That I was the one who understood her well enough to know the real version. That she would not do it to me because we were real. We were real to me. To her, I was the next available audience. I was just the last person in the room to understand that. Do not be the last person in the room. Watch the pattern before it becomes your name in the caption. Before it becomes your decade on the floor. Before it becomes your key on the counter and your name still on the sign outside a place you will never open again. Watch the pattern. It will tell you everything the friendship never did. And it will tell you early enough to matter. If you are willing to look.